I'm Daisy.
And I'm Terry.
And this is the Monday Mindset Podcast,
where we share things of interest to us and hopefully to you.
So let's get started with episode number 130.
And this week, it's Daisy's turn to share something with us. Daisy, what do you have?
Well, Terry, I tell you what I got caught by this week. I got caught by the suggestions on YouTube. I can't remember exactly what I was watching, but you know what YouTube is like. They're very handy with offering you suggestions of other things you might like to watch. And up popped a TEDx Talk. How not to take things personally. Yes, that's something I could do with watching. So I clicked on the link and watched this TEDx talk by a guy called Frederik Imbo. And Frederik Imbo apparently studied theatre at the Royal Conservatory of Ghent. And he has apparently acted in lots of TV series. I assume probably Belgian TV series. And he definitely has an accent, being from Belgium. But he apparently founded a company called Imbo. I'm sure it is probably pronounced completely differently from that. But Imbo is a company which provides interactive training, workshops, presentations, and coaching, all about communication. He is apparently an expert in NLP and communication and teaches other people to be better at communicating. One of the first comments, I don't usually read all the comments on people's videos, but one of the first ones did catch my eye. And considering the topic of the TEDx talk, one of the first comments said that it was a good thing that he didn't take it personally, the lack of interaction that the audience was giving. It said something, called them a very dull audience or something. And I have to say, yes, I sort of felt a little bit awkward for him, because he, with one of those presentations where he was obviously looking for feedback and interaction, and they were awfully quiet. But, I think the Belgian population are a little bit like that. They're a little bit reserved. So maybe it was just the context, or maybe they didn't have many microphones in the audience. Who knows? But that sort of made me chuckle a bit. But how not to take things personally. And apparently he has 2 strategies that will help with this. And he calls them 2 basic strategies, and they are pretty basic, I have to say, and by no means go all the way to solving the problem at hand. But I did feel that they were good things to ponder on and try to put into action. And he shared how easily he takes things a bit too personally. And he has been training as a football referee, in part, by the sounds of it, to learn how to not take things too personally, because a football referee is what he's been training to do. And anyone who's watched any kind of match, but particularly football matches. I'm not a football supporter. I'm not into watching football. But whenever you watch clips, there's always, everyone shouts all sorts of abuse at the referees, don't they? The ref's always wrong. And that's where he asked the audience for a bit of feedback with things that get shouted at refs. And they did actually give him a few examples. But they get a lot of stick, basically. So it was a very good context for him to learn how to put these strategies into place. And I think a lot of us probably struggle with this. I certainly do. I tend to take things way too personally. He talks about some different examples, but things we might take too personally, be it criticism, maybe when someone isn't giving us their full attention, or maybe somebody's turned down an invitation from us, and then we find out on social media, this is an example that he gives, that they actually went out with somebody else and had a great old time. And of course, we tend to take these things a bit personally. Why do we take things personally? What are we thinking? What's going through our minds? And he talks about it being all about our ego. It's our ego taking over and telling us that others should be taking us more into consideration at all times. We want to be right. We want to be acknowledged. We want to be considered by other people. But he says it's pretty exhausting. And if we could just let go of that, we could experience more harmony and connection with other people. That energy could be directed towards nice things rather than focusing on things that drive you a bit crazy. So he says, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? But how? How do you stop taking things too personally? And this is where he brings in the first of his 2 strategies. And the first one, he says, is it's not about me. Look at it from the other person's perspective and shift the focus from me to we. And he says if you can look at the other person's intention, you can take some of that focus off yourself. So if you can just look at it from the other person's perspective a bit more. And he uses an example of people looking at their smartphones, at their mobile phones in the audience. So he said he will be giving a presentation and he might spot somebody in the audience looking at their smartphone, maybe tapping away on their smartphone. And he has to fight against taking this personally. You know, he takes this personally. Well, why are they looking at their smartphone? Why are they not looking at me? Why are they not engaged with me? And all sorts of things will start going through his mind, like they're finding it boring or they're doing something else. So shift your focus from me to we and think about the other person's intention. Look at it from their perspective. He said, maybe they're waiting for a really important message. Maybe they're waiting for the result of an important blood test or something. Or maybe they are a bit bored and looking at their smartphone.
Or maybe they're taking notes on what you're saying.
Yes, that was the last one. He said maybe they're so interested that they're taking notes so that they don't forget. So there could be all sorts of reasons. Shift the focus from me to we. But he says, gosh, that is easier said than done. And he brings up these statistics that you've mentioned before. What is it? We have 50,000 thoughts a day or something, and 80% of those are negative, or at least tend towards the negative. And he says, it takes a lot of effort and discipline to change this. So he's go easy on yourself a little bit here. It is natural to be thinking in these negative ways, and we have to do things to try and break that cycle. When the first strategy, when it's not about me, doesn't work, he says we bring in the second strategy, which is it is about me, but it's a part of yourself that you haven't come to terms with if you're taking it personally. It is a comment that is hurled at you that has no meaning to you or doesn't strike a raw nerve. You're not going to take it personally. I think he used the example of someone shouting out, "You're an orange." Well, you wouldn't take that personally, would you? That's just silly. It's not something that, why would you take that personally? If someone said to you, "Oh, you're so selfish," well, that's more likely, he says, to touch on a raw nerve, because the chances are you do feel like you're selfish from time to time. So it's something that hits on a raw nerve. There's some truth in it. He says if there's no truth in it, you're not going to take it personally. And he says this is where you need to have some empathy. Be a bit kind to yourself, but also maybe to speak up and be vulnerable. Tell people how you feel. If you do that, if you tell someone maybe that you feel hurt because you've come back after a long day at work and you're wanting to chat through your day with your partner, and they're looking up what's on TV later on their phone or whatever. If you actually show some vulnerability and say that you're feeling hurt because you're tired and you wanted to sit down and have them listen to you and offer some sympathy or whatever, if you share how you're feeling and you are vulnerable with them, you increase your chance of understanding from that other person, and for them maybe to take you into account and change their behavior. And this is something I've always said in my Facebook group, is a really good way of diverting things when you get, one of those posts that's maybe on a slightly controversial topic, or even you don't realize it's going to head that way, but it starts getting into one of those debates that gets a little bit heated, and if you're not careful, it can turn into some personal mudslinging, or somebody gets offended by something that somebody else has said, and you know what those posts are like. Before you know it, it's descended into chaos. But one of the pieces of advice that I've always given when these things go a bit sideways, or if you're starting to feel that somebody is attacking you personally, is to actually speak up and say somebody's hurt your feelings, or say maybe that you've taken something personally and are feeling hurt by the way the conversation is going. And I've seen people put this into action, and 9 times out of 10, it stops that thread going in the direction it was going, because it just pulls someone up short, and they see the other person's perspective. They see the way somebody else has been reading the words they've put, and they stop and they think and they change what they're saying. So there is some value, I think, sometimes in speaking up, even if you feel it's a bit risky and you're making yourself vulnerable. So I've rambled off really quite away from some of the things he was saying, but they're basically these 2 very simple strategies. And I did feel that they were the kind of things that, yes, they make sense, but they only go so far if you are somebody who takes things personally. But I thought they were quite good starting points. So, that first one, it's not about me. Shift the focus from me to we. And then if that doesn't work, it is about me. And what do I need to do about that? Is there some work I need to do, some self-empathy that I need to get into? Or maybe I need to speak up and be a bit vulnerable with the person I'm talking to. He ended it on it was a funny demonstration. He asked people who wanted a €20 note. Apparently he gets paid €20 for every time he referees a match. So he said he certainly doesn't do it for the money. But he says, who wants this €20 note? Hands up in the audience. And this was when they were quite interactive. Lots of hands went up. And then he screwed it up into a ball and said, who wants it now? And he just gradually did more and more. He put it in his mouth and chewed it up, and then he stomped all over it. And who wants this €20 note now? And somebody, I couldn't hear exactly what they were saying, but somebody said they still wanted it because at the end of the day it was still a €20 note. And he said, yes, absolutely, no matter what is said or done to you, you will always keep your value. And that's where he ended. I quite like that.
Well, I love that last demonstration that he did. Even if that doesn't necessarily, in my mind, directly relate with the rest of what he was saying, it's such a powerful image. This idea that €20 note is worth the same thing regardless of what happens to it, what is said, what is thought about it. So I love that. I was smiling earlier when you were talking, because when I was a psychologist working with clients, and I would often hear the personalizing of, well, this person said they weren't available. This person said they weren't available. And this person said, no, they didn't want to go out with me. And this person said they didn't want to do it. And it was really hard for clients to not take this as, I'm just so unwanted. No one will go out with me. I would have them instead think of 5 other reasons why the person decided to say no. Or in another example, just, anytime it was something that they would personalize, I would have them think of other reasons that person had decided what they did. And one of the recent ones that I worked on with someone even recently is I texted someone and they didn't reply. Because, nowadays we expect that people are waiting for our texts at all times. And if they didn't write back, clearly they hate us. And instead, I said, can you think of 5 reasons this person might not have responded? Well, their phone was dead. Okay. Why else? They weren't looking at their phone. Okay. Why else? They were in the bathroom, didn't have their phone with them. Oh, okay. Any others? Well, they were at a concert and they didn't see that a text came in. Okay. Something horrible happened and they're in the hospital or something. Oh, okay. So just by doing that, I think it made this person start to realize, I don't know what's actually going on. And I'm putting it through my own filter. I'm projecting onto this. Clearly, it means this person doesn't want to communicate with me and actually hopes I never reach out again. It's like seeing how distorted that interpretation was because there were so many possible reasons behind it. So I love that first strategy of it's not me, it's we, and try to see it from what else might be going on. I think that's a really important perspective taking so that we don't have to personalize everything that feels like it might be a slight or a neglect or something about us.
It's a difficult one. I tell you what I straight away thought when he was talking about that, and it makes a lot of sense, especially the way you've just spoken about it makes even more sense. But the other thing that came to my mind was looking at it from the other perspective. I was thinking of that episode we talked about. It was Brene Brown and I can't remember who, talking about apologizing and talking about it from the other way around when somebody. So I guess in this second part, his second strategy, when he suggests sharing that you're feeling hurt or whatever it is and sharing your vulnerability. And it was that episode about apologizing and how important it is to not justify things with your intent. It is partly, well, it is all about when you're talking about apologizing, but how that person received what you said. Your intent is almost irrelevant. You know what I'm like about always sort of seeing the other side of something. But when he was talking about it, looking at the other person's intent and this perspective taking, but then I was also thinking about it from the other way round of it is important how somebody receives something as well. See what I mean? It's always looking for the argument in everything, but yeah. But I guess I think if both parties both did that, thought about the other person, it would help.
What a different world this would be overall, if you really think about it. The other thought I had about the second thing you talked about is being vulnerable. It's kind of about asking for what you need, about advocating for yourself. Because again, not really recognizing what is that person's intent, as you said. So, for example, I know that my partner has a hard time listening and doing something else at the same time. It's not a multitasking skill that goes very well. So when I start talking and see that the phone is out, rather than having my feelings be hurt by that, I try to say something like, oh, I'll wait until you're done so that you can hear what I'm saying. Not blaming or shaming, just recognizing I'm really not going to be heard if I continue right now. So I'm going to wait. Phone goes down. That is over. Now I'm going to say what I said or need to say so that I'm heard. And sometimes it's hard for me not to be offended or to have my feelings hurt about that. Like, oh my gosh, is that how important I am? But to recognize someone else's needs, and they're looking at the phone for a different reason, maybe. Like you said, something else is coming up. I'm going to wait then until I can have their undivided attention.
Yes, I was going to say, you are sort of tapping into that example that he used at the beginning of trying to think about it from their perspective. Yes, there might be a very good reason why they just needed to check their phone first, and also what's going through their mind. They might be thinking, yes, I just check that quickly, that thing that I really needed to check while I'm thinking about it, or I forget, so that I can put that phone down and give that person my full attention. So there are all these things.
So if I can take a better perspective and not get wrapped up into the slight of it, then that person gets to accomplish what they need to do. They got to take care of whatever they picked up their phone for. And I still get to advocate for myself because I'm going to be heard when I speak. So it's a win-win that way.
Yes, but it often is easier said than done, isn't it? Because, of course, there are those moments as well where they're just sort of absent-mindedly looking at their phone and they're not listening to you properly. But you say that is actually a really good way of getting them to appreciate that without putting them into a defensive position.
And I'm thinking back in my days as a middle school teacher, it was pretty easy to look out at a classroom full of 8th graders and think, oh my gosh, they're all so bored. Look at them. They're trying to think of anything else they could be doing right now. And sometimes if I could do that without taking it personally and think, yeah, they're 14. This is not really what they want to be learning about or talking about. It did sometimes help me to liven up a little bit. Use an example that would pull them in. Do something. Do something to get their attention besides just screaming, because I did take that route sometimes. But by staying out of that place of over-personalizing it, and then my response to that would be to shut down and give up, that's not going to help. So to take that feedback, okay, my audience is disengaging right now. How can I bring them back? How can I connect with them again? Maybe in this example, sometimes I might just need to walk down an aisle. Just move a little differently. Gain their attention that way. Every kid's nervous if the teacher's coming toward their desk. But it's hard to do that if you're starting to get irritated. Like if I'm thinking, these kids, why aren't they listening to me more? I'm going to create more distance with them versus if I can say, I'm not engaging with them in a way that's working right now. How can I adjust?
Yes, I think that's what it comes down to, isn't it? If you are taking things personally, it's not a pleasant space to be in. As he said, it's pretty exhausting. If we could let go of that, we could potentially, experience more harmony and connection. And that kind of energy that you get wrapped up in, wouldn't it be great to be able to direct that towards things that are more fun?
Absolutely.
It benefits you ultimately, but yes, often easier said than done. As with a lot of these things, of course.
Of course.
Okay, right, bye. Don't take it personally, but we're going now.
We don't want anyone to take it personally, but it is past Daisy's bedtime. We talked for 3 hours before we even started recording. So both of us are a little punchy at this point. It's not that we don't love talking to you on this podcast. So don't take it personally. We're going to be back next week. Excited to talk to you again.
Have a wonderful week.
Take care, Daisy.